Hi, this is Justin from Pax Financial, and I wanted to talk about governance, company governance, and governance of assets and businesses. So, in traditional markets and traditional corporate setups, you have a situation where you have maybe a very mature organization, you have an executive team and a board of directors, and maybe some relationships, so business relationships outside the organization, and that group essentially conspires or colludes to move the organization forward. And what that means is that those people in those leadership positions generally want to cement the organization as having an advantage, which generally works well for the shareholders and for the employees, but it also can be at odds with the shareholders and the employees when the subject comes down to compensation packages, the value of the greater environment, so the earth, for example, so respecting climate change, respecting local laws, local authority. Sometimes major issues are encountered that actually have near to long-term consequences for individuals. So, if you think about Facebook, for example, you might be a shareholder of Facebook and you might use Facebook and you might really hate that if you talk on the phone to your friend that you get an ad that seems eerily, it seems almost like a cut and paste of a conversation you had that now you're being directly marketed at. And you might think, man, I own a piece of this organization or I'm an employee at this organization. I don't really like where it's going. And you have zero leverage to change that. When you think about the topic of decentralized governance or decentralized applications, those sorts of nefarious tactics sort of are become impossible, and what happens is that organizations become more utility focused. What I mean is that it requires a consensus among the voting population within the owners of a cryptocurrency, if a project's designed this way, to change the code base or change the programmed rules. And on top of that, you could always tell how a project is governed by reading its code and seeing what rules are guaranteed, what rights are guaranteed within the code base, and you could always check with the community to see what popular issues, what sometimes are called bug bounties, or sometimes they're called, like potential forks or feature upgrades. You can see what's on the horizon for this project. It's all public. It's debated fiercely, and you could be part of that conversation. And as a person who buys into the asset, you then get to participate in governance. This is a radically different model, and it's actually, if you think about, the founders of modern sort of markets and capitalism, people like Adam Smith, and there's a whole host of thinkers in this area. You realize that that's actually the picture that they had of markets and capitalism. With they imagined a situation where individuals could participate and lend money, and that the companies would act on the community's behalf because they would be dismantled otherwise by market forces. Now, because of the opaqueness and because of the legal language and because of the difficulty to access information in traditional market scenarios, that is not necessarily the case. And there's a lot of self-interest and a lot of market inefficiencies that result due to the misalignment of communications, information, and incentives. The, the governance, the idea that individuals can govern and participate in the evolution of services is a fundamentally new area that's brought out because of decentralization. When I can own and transact independently, like by ownership of different digital services and platforms. So let's imagine a decentralized Facebook. There's a company called Mind that's doing a decentralized social network. You imagine that if the social network is not performing that well, then I'm likely to sell my assets and purchase or transition my assets to a platform that does work better, or I'm likely to vote or participate in ways that move the platform forward in that they will address changes that I think are required in the ecosystem, favoring climate change, favoring individual rights, anonymity, autonomy, and these personal interests, because I'm an owner of the project, and because I can contribute to the project, it's more likely that these platforms will evolve through the continued tracking and growth of the platform towards the actual users. So these platforms are also insanely sticky in that once they're launched and once they reach adoption, they never go away. Linux is never going anywhere. Python is never going anywhere. These technologies stick around because they provide a lot of utility, and the way people participate moves them along forward in time. Now, creating them and exposing them as an asset class, these governed bodies now also contain economic value and can be traded with other people. And this is why this idea of shared governance is so positive and powerful. And it does not come without resistance, because power structures understand that the share of the pie, when you own, say, 70% of the means of production, or 70% of the profit, and you see that model is inherently impossible in this new paradigm, you have a person in that position has a tendency to hold on and to fight that tide and culture. But the ship has already kind of sailed, and this idea of decentralized governance, or DAOs, is gaining traction. And if you're curious, I recommend you look into and read up on decentralized autonomous organizations, and you will sort of understand that, well, as they are hard to launch initially, they have a very inherently sticky quality, which makes them very safe to invest in once you're off the ground, and they also confer a lot of rights for the individual participants. Anyway, that's just a quick sort of chat about governance in decentralized systems. And if you're interested in decentralized system governance, I'd recommend you look into how Ethereum is managed, or how Bitcoin's managed, and think about like how do these updates happen. And it's all community momentum, and it's all community based. It's a very interesting subject, and it's radically different than what we see in traditional business structures. And that's another topic in decentralization.